I haven't done anything wrong, or so 13-year-old Jamie Miller insists. As the subject of Netflix's groundbreaking series Adolescence, this repeated phrase reveals something far more disturbing than his crime itself. Sometimes the scariest thing about a crime is a feeling of justification. While watching the show, I discovered Jamie's denial of wrongdoing wasn't an isolated event. Throughout the 4-episode series, parents, teachers, peers all missed or dismissed the warning signs until it was too late. Thanks to its intimate camera work, one long, continuous shot, we, the viewer, are unable to look away from every side of Jamie. From the environment that failed him, through his terrifying arrest and detailed police processing, to his ruthless interview with a psychologist and the chilling footage of his crime, it refuses to look away. When Jamie's father sees this evidence of his son's crime, we see in real time the initial disbelief, the dawning horror, and finally, the broken acceptance. In a moment, what had been isolated cases of violence on the news becomes the Miller families and their community's new normal. But when a child commits such an act, who truly bears the responsibility? To understand the full dimensions of Jamie's story, we need to look beyond the crime itself and explore what genuine maturity means in a world that often confuses silence for strength. Before I move on, I want something clear. Adolescence is a crime drama, but it is not a psychological thriller. It's chilling how many Reddit threads I've seen dissect Adolescence in search of a secret culprit as if Jamie's guilt weren't confirmed in the very first episode. So then, what has captivated audiences if no secret antagonist is hiding in the shadows? The answer is exactly what the show forces on us, which is to say, not the mystery of who committed the crime, but the unsettling reality that a seemingly ordinary boy could do this. The first episode sets off on a quiet morning before police batter through the Miller family's door, tearing the house apart in search of evidence. "You've got the wrong house," Jamie's father tells them, upset they destroyed his home, concerned with his son who will be needlessly traumatized for something he didn't do. This instinctive parental protection makes what comes next really painful, because in Adolescence, you won't find abusive parents to blame for Jamie's crime or a powerful family that undermines the investigation with their connections. When confronted with the CCTV footage of Jamie's crime, everything his father believed true shatters. At first, he can't bear to look at his son, let alone touch him. But he embraces Jamie. Why? Because Jamie's father, like his mother and even his sister, places equal, if not more blame for his crime on themselves for not paying closer attention to him. Their inattention created a false sense of security, believing that as long as Jamie was in his room, darkness couldn't creep in. But their guilt only really tells part of the story. Jamie's crime is just as much about where he comes from as it is about the outside influences. I can't emphasize enough, though, people don't commit crimes like the one in Adolescence strictly because of social media. Blaming it outright is just the modern version of demonizing TV and video games for violence. But that doesn't mean algorithms are blameless. Like anyone, I've seen my feed spiral out of control after just a few clicks, suddenly bombarded with content targeting my gender, age, and loosely associated interests. The difference is in the kind of content that found Jamie fed him the idea that power, anger, and control were the only acceptable responses to his unhappiness. Social media didn't create Jamie's actions, but it accelerated his descent, just as it does for countless young people lured into extremist spaces through algorithm-driven rabbit holes. As Jamie's father even tells us, he had the very videos that radicalized his son to kill someone popping up with just a few clicks of mildly related content. Furthermore, neither Jamie nor Katie were shut-ins. They spent most of their waking hours at school, a place that should have been a second line of defense, keeping Katie, Jamie's victim, safe, and giving Jamie the guidance he needed. In episode 2, when detectives Luke and Misha investigate the school, they're introduced to a place that is more holding pen than educational institution. The episode follows them through hallways where students harass one another verbally and physically, film TikTok challenges, and openly tell their teachers who've resigned to the chaos to shut up. It's here we meet two very important characters. Ryan, Jamie's friend who supplied the weapon, believing he was just going to scare her. And Jade, Katie's best friend, who's convinced the detectives are trying to blame Katie for her own death. Their interaction, Jade attacking Ryan when he pulls the fire alarm to avoid questioning, struck me at first as perhaps a significant event, but it revealed an environment that creates victims on all sides. Boys like Jamie cling to Andrew Tate content because they feel powerless and invisible, while girls like Katie face humiliation when private photos are shared without consent. Jamie approached Katie precisely because this violation made her seem weak enough to accept him. Yet when she rejected him and used coded emojis to mock him online, he lashed out with the belief that being a man means using force. This environment where teachers are helpless to prevent victims from becoming bullies who create new victims perpetuates a cycle of harm. When we look at these systems failing to take responsibility, families assuming their children are safe in their rooms, schools overwhelmed beyond intervention, algorithms feeding manipulative content, Jamie's repeated phrase, "I haven't done anything wrong," reflects the pervasive justification of violence and force. Jamie believes he's blameless because no one effectively communicated otherwise until after Katie was gone. His teachers won't take blame. They're stretched to their limits. His friends dismiss guilt. They never intended for Katie to die. For me, one of the most haunting parts of Adolescence is how everyone involved, including us as viewers, decides violence in any form is justified. Sure, it's satisfying to see Jade punch Ryan, cathartic in a way. You feel so much for this child who has had, in her words, the one okay person in the world stolen, that when Ryan bleeds, there's this secondhand satisfaction from it. But at what point is revenge of any kind a character's motivation before it reflects a real crime? But there's another critical element underlying this story. When Jamie sits across from his psychologist in episode 3, she asks him to describe his father. "What is your dad and his dad like?" she inquires. Jamie's one-word response is, "Men." When asked if his father is loving, Jamie confusedly says, "No, that's weird." This exchange reveals perhaps the single most dangerous contribution to Jamie's radicalization, the pervasive belief that men are naturally less emotional, less capable of vulnerability, and honest connections that aren't held together by rage or stoicism. And this emotional myth has consequences that if we walk away from Adolescence thinking only about Jamie's crime and not the real-world failures it reflects, we miss the whole point of the show. Throughout Adolescence, we see a pattern in how emotions are expressed or suppressed between both genders. Episode 3 for me had the most tension, in particular Jamie's outburst in the detention center, throwing hot chocolate and crossing physical boundaries. How men and women interpret this episode is likely different. A man might recognize the performative aggression as an attempt to establish dominance, while a woman might come out of it feeling uneasy, knowing all too well that a joke is not always a joke. The science behind this is fascinating. While biological differences between male and female brains exist, research consistently shows they're far subtler than we once believed. The neural mechanisms for processing emotions aren't inherently stronger or more numerous in women. What difference is how society conditions us to express them. This conditioning isn't just behavioral. Evidence suggests that persistent emotional repression can create lasting neurological changes, affecting how we interpret and express feelings over time. In Adolescence, we see this conditioning everywhere. The lawyer tells Jamie's father to raise that chin up, be the good dad, and suck it up, right after watching his child strip searched. What a horrifically insufficient way to expect someone to process trauma. But it's what men are told constantly. Don't feel, don't show it, definitely don't talk about it. The contrast between Jamie in episode 1 and episode 3 shows this perfectly. We meet him sobbing in a police car, crying for his dad. Vulnerable, scared, childlike. By episode 3, he's menacing the psychologist, throwing hot liquids and shouting, "You do not control what I fucking do." His vulnerability has twisted into aggression because that's an emotional response deemed natural for him. This isn't just about feelings getting hurt. The consequences are deadly serious. Men are 4 times more likely to take their lives than women, not because they attempt it more often, but because they choose more violent methods. Even in overdoses, men typically take far beyond the lethal amount, whereas women often take just enough. It's as if men are saying, "I'll make sure this absolutely works," while women consider the reaction of those who might find them. Even in our darkest moments, gendered expectations shape our actions. Men are told their emotions don't matter. Women are told their opinions don't matter. We're in a constant push and pull to see who can disregard the other the most. What makes this especially heartbreaking is Jamie's father in the final episode. After 50 minutes of stoically telling his family he's fine, we find him sneaking into his son's room, sobbing into Jamie's pillow, carefully tucking his son's teddy bear in and whispering, "I should have done better." His grief is heavy, but he can only express it completely alone. Meanwhile, Jamie calls out as he's dragged away from the psychologist, "Tell my dad I'm alright. Tell him I'm okay, please." Even after everything, he desperately seeks his father's approval and protection, and his father wants to provide it. We see that in their embrace after seeing the CCTV footage, but neither of them knows how to bridge the emotional gulf between them. See, emotional burnout is real. When you're constantly vigilant about guarding others from your feelings, the numbness eventually feels normal. People like Jamie don't just wake up one day and decide to hurt others. They slowly lose the ability to process rejection, humiliation, and desire in healthy ways because admitting to those feelings makes them a target for ridicule. It's not that men are born without the capacity for emotional intelligence, it's that these crucial skills go underdeveloped like muscles that atrophy from disuse. However, this conditioning, no matter how strong, can be undone. When we choke down our emotions or joke about painful things to avoid talking about them, we're not solving anything. We're postponing an inevitable explosion. Sadness is important. Feeling embarrassed is important. Feeling stupid is important. Naming how you feel is courage in action. When we share our stories, little by little, we create spaces for others to step forward to share theirs. And let's be clear, everyone has a stake in this. Women who dismiss men's mental health struggles are doing just as much damage as men who call women crazy or too emotional. You can't fight for equality while treating half the population's pain as irrelevant. What Jamie needed, what so many young men need, wasn't for someone to teach him to man up. It was for someone to say, it's okay to not be okay. The weight of stress, the fear of failure, the sting of rejection, these are not you. These are factors standing on your chest, standing in your way of finding peace. Instead, Jamie found spaces online that validated his worst impulses, that turned his pain into justified anger, and that gave him a target for his rage. Adolescence has captivated viewers with its unflinching portrayal of teenage violence, but the series, as the creators intended, likely won't have a second season. Unlike its continuous shot filming style, it leaves us with unanswered questions not because it's setting up more episodes, but because real life rarely offers neat conclusions. What happens to Jade, Katie's best friend who lost the one okay person in the world? How did Katie's parents, who we never see, cope with their loss? What made Jamie change his plea to guilty? What I loved about Adolescence is that it doesn't give us easy answers. The creators themselves say this was intentional. As Stephen Graham said, it wasn't created to provide solutions, it was made to start conversations. It's a scream, as Jack Thorne put it, about the crisis we're facing and how we need to think radically as a society about how to save our boys and how we save the girls those boys are damaging. The show's lack of finality forces us to hold up a mirror to people and events in our own lives and search for answers in the real world. For me, one of the most haunting things is how we remember killers' names, their motivations and psychological profiles. How many serial killers can you name? Now how about their victims? Katie's face is only revealed a few times, while her actress Amelia Holliday covers Aurora's through the eyes of a child in the closing credits, becoming the final, haunting reminder of all that was lost in one night. Throughout the series, Jamie clings to his, "I haven't done anything wrong." That third episode with Jamie and the psychologist reveals so much about his character. His behavior isn't straightforward but layered, discovered through indirect questions and his reactions. The way he shifts from trying to charm her to aggressive outbursts shows exactly what happened with Katie when she rejected his nice guy strategy when asking her out, and he resorted to quick, violent solutions. When the psychologist tells Jamie she's writing her last report, that finally triggers something in him. Perhaps the realization that no one is going to protect him from the consequences of his actions. His desperate, "Tell my dad I'm all right," suggests his change of a plea might be less about accepting responsibility and more about reclaiming control in a situation where he feels powerless. Though, as the final episode zooms in on his family, we never exactly know what caused this decision. That being said, this shift represents something profound that many of us struggle with: sitting in the discomfort of acknowledging our wrongs. Like Jamie, we're remarkably resistant to ideas that threaten our self-image and the gratifying delusions we hold about who we really are. Feeling sympathy for Jamie is really complicated. He's a killer. He's also 13 years old. That doesn't excuse what he did. He deserves the consequences of his actions, but as an adolescent, Jamie hasn't even finished the development that shapes who we become, giving early intervention the potential to redirect his entire sense of self and moral understanding. We can hope his change of plea is taking responsibility for his actions. The psychologist reflected in their previous sessions that she was getting through to him despite the hostility of the third episode. After all, mental health isn't linear. There are good days and bad days, steps forward and back. As Stephen Graham noted, the show was created with integrity, with respect, specifically to shine a light on the crisis of young men becoming radicalized and to create conversations between parents and children. Facilitating these conversations means recognizing that handling emotions isn't avoiding them. Telling someone to man up or get over it is useless. If the problem isn't going away, the feelings about it won't either, no matter how deeply you bury them. Many bodily ailments are mute forms of revenge for emotions we've refused to process. It's not just about crying or getting emotional or bitching. It's about meeting others with their points of view and learning to see beyond our own selfish main character reality. For example, Eddie, Jamie's dad, struggles with his lingering mindset from before Jamie's crime, when he believed he did better than his own by never laying a hand on his children. Eddie is eaten up by the tape of Jamie hurting Katie, not just by the video's contents, but that he'd gone into the interrogation room confident in his son's innocence. Should we have done more, he wonders, and his wife tells him it's probably better if they accepted that they should have. Eddie's overcorrection exemplifies the effects of generational trauma. Although Jamie's parents gave their children a space safe from physical violence, neither was their home a place where emotions could be openly addressed. Listen, you don't have to cry. That's not what I'm saying. Not everyone does. But if you feel a darkness gnawing at your bones, remember there's no weakness in understanding yourself, and no strength in ignoring your emotions. Talk to your friends. Talk to someone. You don't have to be alone. And if therapy feels right, know it's like any service. You might need to shop around to find the right fit, so don't give up. You owe yourself peace. Because the true measure of leaving adolescence behind isn't physical strength or power over others. It's letting go of, I haven't done anything wrong, and asking instead, what can I do to make this right? If you enjoyed my exploration of adolescence and its depiction of how we're all just one conversation away from connection, you might enjoy my other analysis of complex human stories. And when you're struggling to understand the complicated emotions that media stirs in us, ditto. That's why I'm Pickle Ditto. Because whatever pickle you're in, I've probably been there too.